But I go, can I just try another one? That moment comes and I just go, this is Sparta!
Gerard Butler finally reveals what most fans never figured out about 300-2006. He screamed, "This is Sparta," and kicked a man into a bottomless pit. And for almost 2 decades, that single moment has defined him in the eyes of millions. But what if I told you that the making of that scene, and almost every scene around it, nearly broke Gerard Butler in ways the movie never let you see? No stunt double stepped in to save him. No safety net softened the fall. What actually happened behind that shot, and behind dozens of others like it, is stranger and harder than anything fans assumed for years. Stick around, because by the end of this you'll understand why Butler still talks about this film like it left a mark on him that never fully healed. Back in March of 2007, nobody in Hollywood was betting on 300. It had no A-list marquee name attached. It wasn't based on a best-selling novel with an existing fan base in the millions, and its entire premise sounded like a hard sell. A stylized retelling of an ancient Greek battle, shot almost entirely against blue screens, based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller. Director Zack Snyder was still a relatively new name behind the camera. And yet, the film opened to a box office number that stunned industry analysts, pulling in tens of millions of dollars in its first weekend alone against a budget that was modest by blockbuster standards. By the time its theatrical run ended, it had grossed hundreds of millions worldwide, turning a stylistic gamble into one of the most profitable films of that entire year. It didn't just make money either. It became a cultural reference point almost instantly, spawning memes, parodies, and a phrase that people still shout today without even remembering where it came from. What most casual viewers never clocked at the time was how much of that success rode on the backs, quite literally, of a cast that had been pushed through months of physical transformation before a single frame was shot. The bodies audiences saw on screen weren't the product of clever camera angles or lighting tricks. They were built through a brutal training program that Butler and his co-stars endured for months, working with a trainer known for extreme, no shortcuts conditioning methods. The sessions blended heavy lifting, sprint work, martial arts drilling, and circuit-based endurance training that left grown men collapsing on gym floors. This wasn't a typical actor's prep montage. It was closer to preparing for a military selection course than for a film role, and the goal was never simply to look strong on camera. The intention was for the actors to move and carry themselves like men who had actually spent their lives training for war. Gerard Butler, cast as the Spartan King Leonidas, took this further than almost anyone else on set. He has spoken since then about how the training pushed his body past what it could reasonably handle. Tendon problems, joint pain, and a shoulder injury became part of his daily reality long before filming wrapped, and the physical toll didn't stop once cameras started rolling either. Long shooting days were often followed by more training just to maintain the physique the role demanded, creating a cycle where recovery time barely existed. He's admitted in interviews that the process left him so depleted that stepping away from serious exercise for an extended stretch afterward felt less like a choice and more like a necessity his body forced on him. The production itself added another layer of strain that audiences never fully appreciated. Almost the entire film was shot inside a studio, with the vast majority of what ends up on screen created afterward through visual effects. That meant the Spartan cliffs, the smoke-filled battlefields, and the God King's throne room all existed only as blue or green screens on the actual set, with the cast required to imagine the world around them and react to enemies, weather, and terrain that simply weren't physically present, acting against nothing, while also performing demanding physical choreography, requires a strange combination of athletic discipline and pure imaginative focus that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as the finished visuals do. Because so much of the fighting was shot without traditional stunt doubles standing in for the leads, injuries on set became something close to routine rather than rare. Butler has described days where filming would pause because someone had been hurt, whether from a mistimed fall, a prop weapon striking too close to an actor's face, or simple exhaustion causing someone's footing to give out during a take. The spears and swords used were dulled for safety, but dull doesn't mean harmless when they're swung at full speed by exhausted men wearing heavy armor in a cramped, artificially lit space. The heat from a studio lighting rig, needed to achieve the film's signature high-contrast look, made the set physically punishing in its own right, and Butler has said he pushed himself to the point of passing out during shooting from a combination of dehydration and sheer overexertion. There's also a side to Butler's preparation that goes beyond the physical grind entirely. He's talked about trying to get inside Leonidas mentally in ways that went further than simply memorizing dialogue, describing a kind of meditative process he used to try to feel what it might have meant to lead men knowingly toward their deaths. Whether or not you buy into that kind of method acting, it's clear that Butler treated the role as something closer to a full possession of character than a performance he could switch off at the end of the day. He also insisted on doing as much of his own stunt work as possible, believing that authenticity in the physical performance mattered more than personal safety, a philosophy that has followed him into other action roles throughout his career, including projects where he's dealt with cold weather exposure and dangerous vehicle stunts. None of this happened in isolation either. The ensemble around Butler, including Lena Headey, David Wenham, Dominic West, and a then-rising Michael Fassbender, went through much of this physical suffering together, and that shared hardship reportedly built a genuine camaraderie among the cast, training side by side for months, wincing through the same brutal workouts, and supporting each other through repeated failed attempts at completing grueling routines apparently created a bond that carried directly onto the screen. Watching the film again with that context, the sense of unity among the Spartan soldiers doesn't feel like clever blocking or direction alone. It feels like men who had genuinely been through something painful together, because in a very real sense they had. The visual style of the movie deserves its own mention here too, because it wasn't simply a stylistic flourish for its own sake. Snyder was chasing something closer to a moving version of Frank Miller's original panels, aiming for shots that echoed the graphic novel almost frame for frame. That ambition meant leaning heavily on visual effects for the vast majority of shots in the film, using the actors as a physical foundation onto which the mythic, painterly world of Sparta was later built digitally. It's part of why the movie still looks distinct today, even as effects technology has moved on dramatically since 2007. Few films from that era committed so fully to a single unified aesthetic vision, and it's a big part of why 300 still gets cited as an influence on the visual language of later action and fantasy productions. Beyond the screen, the film's fingerprints ended up all over fitness culture in a way that few movies ever manage. The training regimen associated with the cast transformation became something of a legend in gyms around the world, with trainers and fitness enthusiasts adapting versions of it for regular people chasing that same lean, sculpted look. It sparked genuine conversations, some productive and some more complicated, about body image expectations for men, about what dedication and suffering in pursuit of a physical ideal actually looks like, and about how far is reasonable to go chasing a look built for a movie screen rather than everyday life. Whatever your take on that legacy, it's hard to deny that the film reshaped how a lot of people thought about strength training in the years that followed its release. For Gerard Butler personally, this role didn't just add a credit to his filmography, it fundamentally redirected his career. Before 300, he'd built a solid but unspectacular resume, with roles in films that showed flashes of talent without ever quite breaking him into the wider public consciousness. Afterward, he became one of the most recognizable leading men working in Hollywood, moving between romantic comedies, character-driven dramas, and the kind of action franchises that leaned directly on the tough, no-nonsense screen presence he first established as Leonidas. Whether audiences saw him falling in love on screen or storming through another action set piece years later, there was always a through line back to the physical intensity he brought to that first breakout role. What makes all of this worth revisiting now isn't just nostalgia for a movie that's approaching its second decade of cultural relevance. It's the fact that so much of what actually went into creating it stayed hidden behind the finished product for years. Audiences saw stylized slow-motion combat and remembered a single shouted line, without any real sense of the joint damage The hospital visits, the collapsed cast members, or the sheer physical desperation that went into building that world. Butler wasn't handed a costume and told to look tough for the camera. He, and the people standing beside him in that ancient Greek pass, paid for every frame of that film with actual sweat, actual injuries, and actual exhaustion that took months to recover from, if it ever fully did. So the next time that famous line gets quoted at a party or shows up in some meme scrolling past on your feed, it might be worth remembering what actually sat behind it. Not just a well-delivered shout from a talented actor, but the product of one of the more grueling production experiences an actor has ever spoken about candidly, long after the cameras stopped rolling and the reviews had already been written. That's the story fans rarely got the full picture of, and now that you have it, the film probably hits a little differently the next time you watch it. What do you think about everything Gerard Butler has revealed about what really went on behind the scenes of 300? Did learning about the injuries, the training, and the sheer physical toll change how you look at the film? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dives like this one, make sure you're subscribed for what's coming next.